Have you ever felt like your children, the very ones you raised with so much love and care, are starting to ignore you? Or perhaps you've noticed that the respect they once had for you seems to be fading. It hurts, doesn't it? After dedicating years of your life to their well-being, you find yourself wondering, where did I go wrong? But here's an important truth. Reacting with anger or giving in to sadness won't fix the situation. In fact, it might push them even further away. What really makes a difference are attitudes grounded in wisdom and calm reflection. In today's video, I'll share 8 powerful steps that can help you restore respect, rebuild trust, and strengthen your relationship with your children, all without unnecessary conflicts. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll receive more helpful content to support your family relationships. Action 1. Don't react in anger. Pause and reflect. Feeling disrespected by the very people you love most cuts deep. When it happens, the instinctive reaction is often to respond with indignation. You might feel tempted to say something like, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me?" While this response is understandable, reacting with anger rarely leads to a positive outcome. Emotional outbursts create distance and weaken the bond. That's why it's crucial to pause, take a deep breath, and reflect before reacting. This moment of self-control can transform the entire dynamic. Take the story of Mr. Martin, a retired school principal, aged 72. He was always a dedicated father, but in recent years, he noticed his children were becoming more distant. The once regular visits had become rare, and when they did happen, they felt rushed and superficial. One day, after several unanswered calls, Martin felt his frustration boil over. His first instinct was to call again and say, "Did you forget I exist?" But instead, he took a deep breath, put on his shoes, and went for a walk in the nearby park. As he walked, he recalled the joyful moments from the past. Afternoons playing in the backyard, helping with homework, and the pride he felt at each achievement of his children. That walk helped him realize something crucial. His worth was not defined by how often his children called. His value lay in the life he built, the love he gave, and the person he had become. The next day, to his surprise, his daughter called to check in. She apologized for not calling sooner and asked how he was doing. Lesson from this story: anger drives people apart. Calmness draws them closer. The way you react sets the tone for the relationship. So, when you feel hurt or ignored, pause, breathe, and remember your own worth. Your dignity is not determined by others, but by the way you choose to respond. Action 2. Rebuild your life and find new purpose. When your children grow distant, it's easy to fixate on that absence. You may find yourself waiting by the phone, hoping for a call or an invitation. But ironically, the most powerful way to draw their attention is to shift the focus back to yourself. Living a life filled with purpose naturally changes your energy, and that shift rarely goes unnoticed. Children tend to admire parents who radiate confidence, joy, and independence, regardless of age. Let me share the story of Mrs. Alice, a 69-year-old widow. After her husband passed away, her children gradually stopped visiting. Calls became infrequent, and eventually, silence filled her days. Alice spent weeks sitting by the phone, hoping to hear from them. But one morning, she came across an old recipe book covered in flour stains. It reminded her of the baking marathons she once enjoyed with her late husband. On impulse, she decided to bake a cake and share it with the neighbors. That simple act reignited a spark. She began experimenting with new recipes, joined a local baking club, and even created a small social media page to share her culinary adventures. Much to her surprise, people started following her page and interacting with her posts. Her days became busier and more enjoyable. Then, one afternoon, her daughter called unexpectedly. "Mom, I saw your photos online. You look so happy. What have you been up to?" That call was the start of a renewed relationship. Her children began visiting more often, curious about her new passion. Lesson from this story: a fulfilled parent is harder to ignore. When you pursue what brings you joy, others, including your children, take notice. Your happiness is magnetic. So, if you feel ignored, start investing in yourself. Take a class, rediscover old hobbies, join community groups, or volunteer. When you fill your life with purpose, you find inner peace, and might just draw your children closer in the process. Action 3. Communicate your feelings wisely. When emotional distance grows, it's tempting to lash out with complaints. The urge to say, "Why don't you ever call me? Don't you care anymore?" can feel overwhelming. But this kind of communication typically triggers defensiveness and creates even more distance. Effective communication depends not just on what we say, but on how we say it. Rather than blaming, choose an empathetic and sincere approach that invites dialogue instead of conflict. Take the story of Mr. Frank, a retired carpenter, age 75. He and his son, Daniel, were once very close, but lately silence had become the norm. Daniel no longer returned calls or responded to messages. Frank felt hurt and considered calling to demand answers. But after reflecting, he decided to try a different approach. He took out a piece of paper and wrote a heartfelt, straightforward letter. "Daniel, I've been thinking a lot about you lately. I miss our conversations and hearing about your life. I just want you to know that I'm always here for you, and I'm proud of you, no matter what." A few days later, Frank's phone rang. It was Daniel. He apologized for being caught up in work and family matters, admitting he hadn't realized how deeply his absence affected his father. From that day on, the two made it a habit to speak regularly. Lesson from this story: words have power. When you express your feelings with kindness, you open a door to reconnection. Avoid phrases like, "You never call me," and instead use statements like, "I miss talking with you." Empathy builds bridges. Guilt erects walls. Action 4. Set healthy boundaries. Respect is a two-way street. If you want your children to respect you, you must first respect yourself. And that starts with setting clear, healthy boundaries. When you allow disrespectful behavior to continue without addressing it, you unintentionally send the message that such behavior is acceptable. By standing up for yourself, you teach others how to treat you. Consider the story of Mrs. Sarah, a retired nurse of 70. Her son, Lucas, rarely visited unless he needed something: money, babysitting, or a listening ear. Sarah, eager to maintain their bond, always dropped everything to help. Over time, the requests became more demanding. Lucas would show up unannounced, expecting Sarah to care for the grandchildren for hours. Gratitude was never expressed, and Sarah's own needs were constantly sidelined. One afternoon, after yet another last-minute request, Sarah decided it was time to change. She responded with calm resolve. "Lucas, I love you, but I can't help today. I've made plans for myself." Lucas was surprised and irritated. He tried to insist, but Sarah stood her ground. That evening, she attended the book club she had recently joined and enjoyed herself. In the following weeks, Lucas noticed the shift. His mother was no longer waiting around for his calls or sacrificing her plans for his convenience. Gradually, he adjusted his attitude and began treating her with more respect. Lesson from this story: self-respect teaches others how to respect you. Setting boundaries doesn't push your children away. It shows them that your time and well-being matter. When you prioritize yourself, others tend to follow your lead. Action 5. Lead by example. Respect isn't something you can demand. It's something you earn, often without words. The best way to teach your children to respect you is by consistently demonstrating respect toward them, toward others, and toward yourself. Children learn from what they see. The way you handle disagreements, the patience you show when frustrated, and the kindness with which you treat others become their silent lessons. Let me tell you about Mr. Vincent, a retired factory worker and grandfather of 5. Over the years, his adult children started visiting less and less, and when they did come by, they were glued to their phones, barely engaging in conversation. Vincent was hurt. He wanted to say, "Why do you even bother coming if you're going to stay on your phones?" But instead, he chose another approach. When they arrived, he welcomed them with warmth. "I'm so glad you're here. It's always nice to see you." Even when his questions were met with short answers, he listened with genuine interest. He never criticized or complained. On his birthday, his children forgot to call. Instead of getting angry, Vincent sent a simple message. "I hope you're all doing well. I miss you." Little by little, things changed. His children started calling more often and visiting without their phones. One day, his son said, "Dad, your patience really made us realize how much you care, and how we've taken that for granted." Lesson from this story: respect is contagious. When you treat your children with consideration, even during challenging times, you plant seeds that eventually grow into mutual understanding. Action 6. Maintain financial independence. As we grow older, one of the most empowering ways to maintain respect is by staying financially independent. While it's natural to believe that our children will care for us as we age, relying solely on them for financial support can create tension and resentment. On the other hand, financial independence inspires admiration. When your children see you managing your life responsibly, they're more likely to respect you as someone capable and self-sufficient. Take the example of Mr. Edward and Mrs. Lucy, a retired couple in their early 70s. After retiring, they decided to downsize, moving from a large family home to a smaller, more manageable apartment. They adjusted their lifestyle, created a careful budget, and avoided unnecessary debt. At first, their children thought they were being overly cautious. But as time went by, they noticed something remarkable. Their parents never asked for money, never complained about finances, and always seemed to have things under control. Soon, the children began seeking financial advice from Edward and Lucy, curious about how they managed their money so effectively. The couple's quiet, consistent approach to financial independence earned their children's deep respect. Lesson from this story: financial independence sends a powerful message. It shows that you value your dignity and take responsibility for your life. This doesn't mean refusing help when needed, but rather doing your best to stay self-sufficient. When children see you handling life with confidence, their admiration grows naturally. Action 7. Forgive, but never forget your worth. When our children hurt us, by ignoring our calls, dismissing our feelings, or treating us with indifference, forgiveness might feel impossible. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means releasing the emotional burden that weighs down our hearts and keeps us stuck in resentment. Holding on to bitterness only intensifies our suffering. Forgiveness, on the other hand, allows us to move forward with peace and clarity. Yet, it's essential to remember, forgiving someone doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. You can extend grace while still standing firm in your self-worth. Take the story of Mrs. Margaret, a retired teacher and mother of 2 adult children. Her daughter, Claire, had always been affectionate, but over time she grew distant. The phone calls stopped, the visits became rare, and silence settled into Margaret's days. She felt rejected and blamed herself. For months, she sat beside the phone, waiting. But one afternoon, as she glanced at a set of old paintbrushes gathering dust in the corner, something shifted. Margaret had always loved painting, but had abandoned the hobby years ago. On impulse, she picked up the brushes and started painting again. She joined a local art group, exhibited her work at a community fair, and rediscovered the joy of creativity. During this process, she wrote a heartfelt letter to Claire. "Claire, I forgive you for the distance between us. I understand that adult life brings many responsibilities. I just want you to know that I love you, miss you, and will always be here." A few weeks later, Claire showed up at her mother's door unannounced. Seeing Margaret surrounded by colorful canvases and paint jars brought tears to her eyes. "Mom, you're painting again? Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, clearly touched. Margaret smiled softly and replied, "I've been busy taking care of my happiness." That visit marked a turning point. Claire began visiting more frequently, not out of guilt, but out of admiration for her mother's strength and renewed zest for life. Lesson from this story: forgiveness frees you from pain, but self-worth keeps you grounded. Don't let hurtful actions define your identity. Forgive, move on, and live with purpose, but never lose sight of your intrinsic value. Action 8. Build a new circle of companionship. Loneliness is often one of the most challenging aspects of feeling ignored or disrespected by our children. When our emotional support system shrinks, we start relying exclusively on our children to fill that void. But emotional dependence can lead to frustration, disappointment, and resentment on both sides. The solution: expand your social circle. Building friendships with neighbors, joining community groups, or reconnecting with old acquaintances provides emotional nourishment beyond the family dynamic. This shift can significantly improve your sense of well-being. Consider the story of Mr. Alfred, an 82-year-old widower. For years, his social life revolved entirely around his 2 children. He depended on their visits to feel connected. But as they got busier with their own lives, the visits became shorter and less frequent. Alfred's days grew quieter and more isolating. After a particularly lonely week, he realized something had to change. He signed up for a senior activity group at the local community center. He was nervous at first, but was soon greeted with friendly smiles. The group had weekly coffee meetups, a monthly book club, and a walking group that strolled through the nearby park. Before long, Alfred found himself eagerly anticipating these gatherings. He shared stories, laughed, and even helped plan a small group trip. As Alfred's life filled with new friendships, his dependence on his children decreased. He still loved and missed them, but their absence no longer left him feeling empty. Ironically, his newfound independence caught their attention. "Dad, you've been busy lately. I saw the pictures from your walking group. It's great to see you so happy," his daughter said one evening over the phone. Soon after, his children started visiting more often, not because they felt obligated, but because they were genuinely curious and inspired by his joyful, independent life. Lesson from this story: loneliness fosters emotional dependence, but an active social life brings balance. By nurturing new friendships, you relieve your children of the pressure to meet all your emotional needs. This space often allows the relationship to grow naturally and healthily. Final thoughts: reclaim your peace, dignity, and connection. Navigating relationships with adult children as we age is undoubtedly challenging. Yet, it's entirely possible to restore respect and rebuild meaningful connections. These 8 strategies aren't quick fixes, but practical, proven steps toward fostering healthier family dynamics. By responding with calm instead of anger, finding personal purpose, setting boundaries, leading by example, and maintaining financial independence, you lay a solid foundation for genuine reconnection. Above all, remember this: respect is not demanded, it is earned through self-respect. You are more than a parent. You are a complete individual, with talents, dreams, and a life of value. Now I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me if you're ready to apply these steps in your own life. Thank you for watching. Stay well, live with joy, and never forget, your worth is eternal.